Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Ezra Klein went on Andrew Schulz's Flagrant podcast and had a long conversation about his abundance proposals, as well as Trump, Zohran Mamdani, all that stuff. Ezra Klein is the abundance guy. He wrote the book called Abundance, about essentially a new approach to like housing, but also other projects. He focuses on housing, basically saying there needs to be more housing built, and the reason there isn't is because of too much regulation. So he essentially is making an anti-regulation argument from the liberal side. That's not all of it, but it's more just the idea that this stuff is complicated and you have to decomplicate the process if you want change to happen, building to happen, and abundance to happen. So he gets a lot of criticism for the left because this idea of deregulating obviously leaves these building projects, whether it's affordable housing or private building, it leaves it wide open to the main problems that are being regulated against in the first place, which is, shoddy building that's dangerous, stuff that's not climate proof as the climate situation is getting worse, etc. So there's a reason a lot of those regulations are there, even though there is probably merit to the argument that simplifying the process is an answer in some cases where there's stagnation. And Andrew Schulz is continuing to have these political conversations. I know I've been covering him a lot lately, but it's really just because he keeps having these left-leaning or left-wing guests on. And so that creates interesting opportunities with the crosstalk between them. But it also seems like he is looking for his excuse to pivot to a more left-wing position. And I think he's using the Epstein stuff as an excuse to get away from Trump a little bit, the war stuff as well. Although none of this was unpredictable. I mean, I think the Iran war and how willing Trump was to bomb them on behalf of Israel really shocked a lot of people. I do think a lot of people who voted for Trump did not realize that that's what they were voting for. The Epstein stuff, I really find it hard to believe that anybody's that shocked at Trump's behavior here. And so I think for Andrew, it's more so that he's just becoming uncomfortable with the vision for America that Trump has. And really, if you voted for Trump, most of what you're getting is in line with that vision, even the Epstein stuff. Because, yeah, he might have said sort of that, oh, yeah, sure, I'd release it. He kind of waffled on that, though. And I mean, if you really pay attention to the Trump vision, Trump's actions, what he says, what he does, then it was pretty obvious that he was never going to put out Epstein stuff that incriminates himself. I mean, he was always one of the closest people to Epstein. So, I mean, I don't know. People shouldn't be that surprised about what they're getting from Trump. However, I think Andrew is in search of different answers, and he's leaning towards people like Zohran Mamdani, who at least he feels have a focus on, everyday people's issues. And that is where a guy like Zohran Mamdani is cutting through more, is by making people feel like he's focusing on the things that they care about. So that's a lot of what they talked about here. We'll listen to this for a second, then talk about it and move on to some other things. Just to be clear, the context for this first couple clips that we get into is they're talking about how to seize on the moment where the conservative and MAGA base is roiling against Trump. So they're not explicitly talking about pandering to Republicans here, even though that's kind of what it sounds like. It's more so in the context of how do you talk about Trump to the people who voted for him, them specifically, not in terms of like the broader project of winning elections, but like how do you talk about Trump in this moment where his base is upset at him. So we'll listen to that and then hear some of Ezra's arguments about how he thinks Democrats and liberals should approach policy.
I can give you the argument for why you should believe there is less here than one would think.
Okay. Less here meaning?
In Epstein, right? This is sort of where I was a week or two ago, which is that the amount of firepower, like investigatory, law firm, repertorial, and government firepower that has been aimed at this thing, trying to find lawsuits to bring, because there's money here, there's media here, whatever, whether people used to be scared of Epstein, they're definitely not now. It's the best media organizations in the world, the biggest law firms in the world, the Biden administration, the Trump administration. You tell me there's something none of them can breach? I found that hard to believe. And the thing that is weighting down the other side of it for me is how much the Trump administration appears to be panicking.
Panic mode.
Like genuinely panicking as there are demands to breach it. If it wasn't dangerous, I don't know why they don't give it to Congress. There's a reason nothing can be Watergate again, which is that in Watergate you had an independent, this was a time, my first book is Not Abundance, Why We're Polarized, is about party polarization. And Watergate happens during like the nadir of party polarization, which is to say the two parties are very mixed. You have a lot of liberal Republicans, you have conservative Democrats. Right. So the congressional parties are very independent. This world, like if you imagine Watergate happening with Fox News and like the hyper-polarized Republican Party of today, where something like Mike Johnson, recessing Congress to keep a vote he doesn't want from happening, there's no Watergate. Watergate relies on the Republican Party turning on Nixon, demanding the information, and then ultimately going to Nixon and saying, you have to resign. But in terms of can it be a scandal that envelopes Trump and that he kind of can't get away from, it seems like it is. And one of the reasons I was thinking about this, liberals like me always complain about how they feel nothing sticks to Trump. And one of the reasons that so little that they care about sticks to Trump is that the things they're thinking of that need to stick to him are things in their worldview, right? And so if you have their worldview, my worldview, if you're mad about him lying to his people about cutting Medicaid or something, and people care about that, and who would believe you on it, they already don't like Donald Trump, like it's already done. This is happening inside MAGA's worldview. This is under their framework of the world.
And I think sometimes liberals put all their eggs in these baskets that don't appeal to the conservative side at all, so it's not going to affect them. It has to be an issue that they're going to be tugged at. Epstein tugs at them, also tugs at Democrats. Why would you not want to know about government corruption? Why would you not want to know about the covering up of like a pedophile? Like this is important shit. So this is one of those things where I think Democrats don't get distracted. Don't get distracted by him doing the Obama thing. Don't get distracted by the MLK shit. Don't get distracted by the Washington Redskins. That's distraction for liberals to chomp at and go, you see, he's a racist. You see, he was no. Stay on Epstein, and when the entire country is just asking about Epstein, something's going to break.
But he's not trying to distract us. He's trying to distract his people.
Well, he's trying to feed
Wall Street Journal, the Murdochs, Obama. It's like spinning a giant wheel.
I think it does both, right? Because the Democrats start to go, look how racist he is. He wants to bring back Redskins. And then his base goes, shut up. You guys are triggered by everything. And then the conversation is about that.
I think his point is to borrow your verbiage from earlier, if we're looking at the worldview of conservatives, so much of it revolves around protecting children. Don't teach them XYZ. Don't do gender reassignment surgery. Don't abort babies. This pedophilia thing is really bad. And if you're a Democrat and Trump is trying all this fuck shit with like, Obama did this, instead of saying, look at what Obama's doing, say what he's doing is a distraction from the harm of children. And conservatives, if we want you to realize this guy isn't who you thought he was, I'm staying on that. I'm not being like, look, because then all these other things, there's usually an exit ramp because it doesn't matter in their worldview.
One of the things I always want people to add when they're talking about this stuff, when you're talking about free, is like, it should be free and plentiful, right? Oftentimes people talk about making something rather free, healthcare, buses, whatever. The thing that will happen correctly, right, if you make this thing free that people need, is more people are going to use it. And so the question is, how do you also make it plentiful so you don't get rationing, you don't get wait lines, you don't get deterioration in service, you don't have like all kinds of bad things happen. And that tends to be a little trickier, right?
How do you do it?
The left tends to be very willing to say, we're going to tax rich people and move the money over here. Fine, that's great. Like I am supportive of taxing rich people and moving the money over here. Not Andrew, you can't tax him. I think people are not always just skeptical of higher taxes. I think they feel they don't get enough for the taxes they pay. And so if you begin showing people that you're being ruthless about making sure that their money is well spent,
I would gladly pay.
Then I think they are more willing to pay more.
I don't want you to move on from the point you're about to make, which is like, how do you make them plentiful?
Oh yeah, so there's one of the arguments of abundance, right? Which is the big argument of abundance is we need to sort of refocus politics, in this case sort of like liberalism, on the question of what do we need more of and how do we get it? And it's a big critique of like how we get on our way on that. But another way of saying it is that liberals, leftists, Democrats, whatever, tend to operate on the subsidized side of the ledger, right? They see a problem and it's like, how can we give you some money to make this easier for you? And that's good. But then we don't deal with the fact that in some cases, if we can't make then more of the thing, like say in the student loan situation, a bunch of that money is going to get pocketed, right? Or give a different version of it. If we pumped a lot of money into rental vouchers in New York City, that would just lead to landlords getting richer. Yeah. Not only, but there is not enough units.
Yeah.
And so this is called, there's a term for this, cost push socialism or something, where you subsidize something that you are otherwise constricting the supply of. And so what I'm saying is that the most important question is how you increase the supply of these things. If you're going to make the buses free, how do we have more buses? If you're going to make, if you're going to freeze the rent, but how do we build a lot more housing, public and market rate? The thing I've not seen Mamdani describe in detail is like how he's going to make public housing affordable to build and market rate much faster.
Yeah, so like I said, at first they're talking about the Trump-Epstein stuff. And Ezra is taking a pretty, classic liberal stance on it, which is to downplay the conspiracy aspect. So I can understand why he would do that. He mentions here that he naturally is skeptical of conspiracy theories, and also that the extent of people like Bill Cosby and P. Diddy and Trump and Epstein, the extent of their misbehavior and their conspiracies that they have built around this stuff has broken down his faith in the idea that like generally people are not engaging in dark conspiracy. So he acknowledges that at one point in the interview that there might be more of these conspiracies abound than people realize, but he doesn't want to really say that that's what's going on here with Epstein. And instead, he kind of takes this angle of like, well, people shouldn't be surprised if there's less here than they think. And I understand the temptation to take that stance, except the way Trump's acting does not line up with that. And also all of the information that we've been getting that contradicts what the administration is now saying goes against that. Pam Bondi said she had thousands and thousands of hours of tapes. There's now reporting that there's 100,000 pages of files related to Epstein. I mean, what is in 100,000 pages? I get that there might be some stuff in it that's incidental and doesn't necessarily incriminate people. But if they have, it is clear that there was a broad conspiracy here, and that somehow the interests of that conspiracy, the people implicated in it, and the information that is hidden within this conspiracy has some kind of implication on the broader power structure of our politics. That seems to be the project that Epstein was engaging with, and that matches up with the fact that leading up to his trial and his deposition, people were concerned he was going to drop a bunch of names. All of a sudden, he ends up dead. I mean, to the extent that conspiracies exist, that's what they look like. And that's what somebody like Ezra Klein is kind of naturally positioned against, because he is, as a liberal, and I relate to this myself, more positioned towards like institutional authority. Like there has to be some authority from these institutions. We have to be able to listen to them and accept what they tell us as true. So even in the case that Trump's now running the institution and his psychopaths like Kash Patel are the ones who are now saying that we have to forget about this Epstein stuff, Ezra Klein's instinct is to defer to authority on that. So, I mean, I think that kind of belies a flaw in his thinking. That also goes back to the abundance argument, which they do get to at the end there. And Ezra Klein really fleshes out his thoughts on the abundance stuff. And in a lot of ways, I totally get what he's saying. But the main critique of it is that it just doesn't recognize the sheer massive weight of the disbalance of power that exists between, the interests that would be doing the building versus the people who need the houses to live in. And so, yes, prioritizing making it easier to build so that there's more houses, which can start to alleviate some of the pressure that people feel around housing. That would be a good thing, except you're just furthering the leverage that the people who own the units have. And part of the reason that these regulations exist, whether they be rent freezing or regulations about how much you can charge, or regulations about how safe the units are, or union regulations about who is building it, is so that the people who stand to profit from the units are not the main ones who are benefiting from this arrangement. Because people need housing, so if they have no other options, they're gonna go with a shitty, dangerous, or shoddy option if they need to. And if it's profitable for landlords to build stuff like that, because people will accept those units because they don't have any other choice, then the landlords are going to do that and they're going to get away with it. So you might have more housing, but it's going to be shitty housing. And again, you did not account for any of the problems that sort of created these disbalances in the first place. In other words, yes, you might get more building, but you're just going to end up with more empty units because people want to price gouge and create scarcity. So there is something compelling about his argument that if you are going to make things more free or more readily available, you also have to address the production side of things. In other words, the reason certain things are plentiful, like in tech, for example, is because of how profitable they are and the fact that people are allowed to profiteer there. And so that motivates the building and it creates, the economic flow in that sector. Whereas once you start creating harsh regulations, or you're saying this is only the business of the government and private interests can't have anything to do with this, or we are going to stop people from building with certain materials, you're restricting the flow of resources into that sector, which is going to lead to less on the supply side. So that just has to be addressed. And I think that essentially what Ezra proposes is a short-term solution, but it's not a vision for how to actually legislate a society. It's more of a vision for how to get us out of the current situation we're in and to sort of do away with some of the inertia that exists when it comes to like housing. But I don't think that his solutions really go all the way. And I think ultimately the lack of vision when it comes to what it actually looks like on the other side of some of these policies is going to lead to, for lack of a better word, inflated versions of the problems that we already have. Although I do think that his core proposition that we need to focus on the amount of production happening rather than just the consumer side, how much you pay for a certain thing, is definitely important. So the other thing that has happened related to Trump that is important, and I don't believe it is a distraction, although it may serve as one, and we'll see how far it goes, but Trump has signed an executive order regarding homeless people, essentially aimed at pushing the Justice Department to prosecute more harshly when it comes to people on the streets and to push for people to be like permanently institutionalized or indefinitely institutionalized. And they also want to put pressure on states to essentially criminalize homelessness and divert funding away from evidence-based programs like harm reduction. So rather than giving people any type of treatment or giving them safe conditions where they can kind of detox from these drugs, they just want to criminalize, and they want to incentivize states to criminalize homelessness. So while I think it's a relatively popular issue that somebody has to do something, homelessness is a horrific problem right now. And this does go back to the housing issue, but essentially, as Republicans tend to do, the goal here is to just remove the problem from people's line of sight and also to divert it towards institutions that can be profited from, private prisons, things like Alligator, Alcatraz, and other sort of horrendous human rights abuse factories. That's what Trump wants to create. He wants to send people to institutions where they can be kind of locked away. And that's true because the Trump administration doesn't want to spend any money on programs that actually help these people. So even if you feel like they need to be institutionalized because that's the only way, because they can't help themselves and they need help somehow, those type of programs need a lot of funding. When they don't get funding, those places are horrific. And one of the major reasons that Reagan turned everybody onto the streets during his presidency is because of how much pressure the state was facing over how horrendous those conditions were. Reagan's solution was to just dump all those people out on the streets. Now Trump's solution is to just collect them all again and put them into tiny little concentration camps that will, again, just put more pressure on the state. But it will probably drive a lot of profits for shareholders in the meantime. So as Trump moves towards institutionalizing and incarcerating more people, different marginalized groups of people, homeless people, immigrants, anybody else that he deems to be some kind of criminal, there is going to be more pressure, a parallel pressure on the state. There's just going to be more images of stuff like this. And while, some people might be happy if all of a sudden the homeless people start thinning out on the streets, at a certain point, the flip side to that, which has been pretty well covered in the case of like Alligator Alcatraz or CCOT, which is how, if you're going to round people up, the means of housing and supporting them is going to either have to be pretty robust or it's going to be pretty atrocious. So, the more images of that, the more instances of these different types of prisons that they're going to try to create throughout the country, the more opportunities for us to apply pressure based on. I mean, we have no choice because people are going to become numb to these things, and we are sort of actively letting it happen right now, but we have no choice but to call attention to these things and call attention to the conditions at places like Alligator Alcatraz. That's the only way that we're going to ultimately redeem the direction of this country, because we are going to some pretty bad places at the moment.